All Things Alice. This podcast will explore the cultural phenomenon of Alice in Wonderland as artistic landmark and global symbol of inspiration and imagination. I'm your host, Frank Beddor, the author of the Looking Glass Wars trilogy. Let's explore, what is it about Alice? Welcome to the show, everyone. I love doing this podcast because it lets me reconnect with collaborators and learn a few new things about them. And today is a prime example. I am joined by Adrienne Kress. If you're a fan of mine, you know that she co-wrote Hattermatic and Ghost in the Hatbox. But Hatter's Adventures is just the tip of the iceberg for Adrienne. She's done theater, she's done film, TV acting, graphic novels. She has a super impressive bio. So we're going to have a lot of fun catching up today. It's been a little while. It's been a heartbeat. It's been a minute since we've chatted. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for joining me. And Adrienne, welcome to the show. Oh, it's good to see your face.
It's so good to see yours.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for inviting me. This is great. Reunion.
This conversation, I want to talk about obviously your books and writing, but I didn't realize that you had written a play or that you had started off as a playwright. And we have that in common a little bit, and also starting off as an actress. And so I want to talk about that. So I'm going to jump in with.
I'm also a producer now.
You're a producer now. Wow.
We also have that in common.
You're so competitive.
No, I was just saying we have that in common.
Yes,
we have that in common.
We do.
But it's not it's my husband and I produced a few that, but we produced this very small indie horror movie over COVID.
Oh, congratulations on that.
Yeah, we wrote it and he directed. I was in it. It was just because we were supposed to go on a honeymoon in 2020 and that didn't happen. So we used that money to make a little movie.
So, wait. So you were going to go on
quite in the same.
Wait. You were going to go on a honeymoon, and instead of a honeymoon, you produced a horror movie. What does that say about the launch of your marriage?
Yes, indeed. That's how I knew I had met my soulmate.
Yes, that's great. Well, the reason that I was interested in the acting part of it, because I'm really curious, because I started off as an actor, but I had been doing commercials and things for ski companies when I went from the US ski team to sponsor. So I caught the bug. I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting, and maybe I could do a few things. And you started off really young, though. You started off when you were a kid, and that's much different because you don't have all the bad habits, and you probably don't. I was so self-conscious. Yeah. What bad habits do you have when you're a kid? You just get in front of the camera and you just improvise, right?
It's true. Well, in fact, interestingly, I did theater first. So, and I did theater school first. So I wasn't doing professional gigs until high school. I was studying at art schools and doing plays and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of interesting because with theater acting, you're still from the beginning, even if you're like 10, 11 years old, there's still stuff, all this technique of just by virtue of being on stage.
Yeah, that's much different. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I talk about I don't think bad habits, but there's definitely habits you learn. And then when you get older and you're suddenly in theater school in England as an adult, and they're like, okay, everything you need to just relax. You overthink. I'm like, it became. Now it's less about technique, Adrienne. You're blocking, your technique. I want you to forget it all and just be in the moment. So there was, like that, those sorts of habits, I guess. Yeah.
I found it hard not to try and do what I thought they wanted, the performance, versus sort of tapping into my own kind of truth in the moment. So the auditioning was very, very scary and daunting. But the actual doing of it, once you get past that, where you're not trying to get the job and being on set, and I did a few plays as well, I found those really challenging because it's so demanding night after night. But in terms of the couple of movies I did, I thought, oh, if you're just really relaxed and you start off by being just yourself and then think about what to bring to it, you kind of find some sort of voice in the moment. Did you find
Yes.
the same thing, or what was your approach?
Oh no, I mean, absolutely. I think so I came to film acting after theater acting. So one of the things, that I think almost all theater actors will tell you is, there is a steep learning curve of do less,
Yeah,
okay, do nothing at all. So I found that very challenging, but at the same time I agree it's very freeing with film, to have multiple chances to do something, so multiple takes, um and not really knowing that like you're having an intimate moment that's like so tiny and just so between you and the other person. Oh, and there happens to be a camera here. It's actually very freeing. But I'm with you on auditions. I've gone to a place now with auditions where I'm just like, if they want me, they want me. So they want what I can do, they want what I look like, they will want me. If they want someone else, then they didn't want me. I know I'm good enough that it's not going to be, oh no, this person is terrible, why would we ever work
right.
with her? It's very much what they're looking for on their end. So I've sort of taken uh to a place with auditions where I'm a lot more relaxed than I used to be. I used to be so wound up, and I have to be able to read their minds and what do they want. um Now I'm sort of like, because you'd get way more auditions than you get work, right? It's
Right.
like, have the pyramid where, so now I'm just going to take advantage of this moment to act, because it's not like you get a ton of gigs. So yeah, it's
I was shocked how little you have to do. It's just the thoughts that come across your mind, into your mind and through your eyes. The expressions you do, if you try, you're dead. It shows you're overacting. And that from doing a play to doing a scene and the camera's on you, that was startling to me. So
it's very, yeah, it's completely different, and it's very hard. It's very hard, and it's it's sort of tough when people will fault act. Like sometimes actors are to blame if there's a bad performance in a movie or a TV show you really like. Sometimes it is. But 9 times out of 10, what that actor doing is still very, very difficult. And it's all the stuff around it, whether it's the lines, whether they were given time, with the work and stuff, because I don't think people realize how hard it is to do nothing. It's really, really hard.
well, because it's really the thought process, and that you have to prepare and you have to get in that frame of mind so that you're thinking the thoughts that get communicated. Much like writing, when people are reading, you have this idea of what you're trying to communicate with a sentence and a paragraph and a chapter, and you think, are they going to know what I'm feeling? And is this going to come off the page? Is there any chance this is going to happen? Probably not. At least that's how I felt. Like there's no way they're going to get this.
Oh,
And
but it's the best feeling when they do.
wow, it's in both, in acting and in writing, when they come back and they tell you subtextually what was going on for you when you were creating that or writing that scene. And the same thing with acting. It's all that, oh, it's so effortless. Right.
The most effortless things you see in life in general, I believe. I was about to just say in the arts, but I think, with you, with the skiing, I think in probably all areas of life, the more effortless the thing looks, the more effortful one ought to assume it is, and the more impressed we should be.
That's so true. And okay, so when I was acting, one of my acting coaches said that if you really want to understand the playwright, you have to understand who they are as a person. So read their biographies or learn why they're telling these stories, and that will give you hints into the text. And then she said, now I want you to write the scenes before the scene that you're acting, as if you were the playwright. And so I did that, and that's what sort of cued me into wanting to write books, because I love playwrights. I think the work is remarkable, how so much of it comes through this dialogue. But that experience of writing out scene before the scene I was acting was what got what motivated me to start. So I'm curious because you started based, well, first of all, you had English teachers as parents. That seems like a high bar to deal with, but you also, it's in your DNA. And so obviously you started writing. So tell me about writing plays and ultimately how the writing process of writing a play might inform the actress you are now, today.
I think so. I think technically the acting probably, like you actually, probably came first, but not really, because at the same time with the English teacher parents, I was always sort of writing things. And my dad taught creative writing. So add on top of that. So there'd be like, let's do this little exercise I'm doing with my, high school students to his like 5-year-old daughter, right? So I was always creating stories and playing make believe, and so they were always sort of meshed together. But I think when I came to playwriting properly, I'd at that point been a drama major for long enough that I'd seen enough scripts and I had done enough that writing plays came from an actor's head. It came from character, like understanding character as an
Hmm.
actor. And I think that has also translated into the book writing subsequently. But I think then with writing plays, and as you said, it's so dialogue. Well, not, I guess not all of them, but generally plays are very dialogue heavy, and that's really what you have to go off of as an actor and as a director. I think that led into my very, very dialogue heavy books. That writing dialogue is probably my favorite thing to do in general, and in specifically books. And then one of the Bendy books with The Illusion of Living, I literally just put in a short play, just,
Why
because why
not?
not? So I guess the acting informed the playwriting, which in turn informed the book writing. So it does come back to acting. And for me, being inside the head of the characters and going inside out. I think there are some authors, like your George R.R. Tolkien's, who
Right.
create mythos and world building and all this stuff. And then he's like, all right, how do I tell the story? Which characters do I need to tell the story I want to tell? Whereas I generally come from the germ of like the character and outward, like inwards out
Right,
sort of
right,
thing.
right. Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. Now, do you say the dialogue? Do you read the dialogue out loud? Do you play the different parts when you're in your room writing your play or your prose? How or do you read it to somebody and see how it, or do you just trust it?
I definitely brainstorming what, I can sort of be just going for a walk or something and then start to create a little dialogue in my head and then go, oh no, remember this as you're walking, just don't forget this. um and I do a weird sort of humming thing that
Oh,
I only realized I did it recently. I think somebody, because I write sometimes with other people in the room. We're not necessarily writing together, but just sort of for moral support. And I sort of, so clearly I'm like reading what I, not even just dialogue, but just any words on the page I'm reading, but I'm sort of not saying the words out loud. I'm like, let's say like, how are you today? I'll be like, I'm not sure if that was loud enough, but I'll sort of like hum. So clearly I'm constantly reading out loud, but it's very, very, very small. With plays, I mean, with plays, it's often you workshop
yes.
them, and you workshop scenes and you take them out.
And you have
And
actors come and
you get your actor
participate,
friends, yeah, and you
and
all
they improvise and they try and outdo you. I've had that happen, right?
and you try to get, you're like, oh, this doesn't, why this scene's way too long, or oh, we lacked so much exposition before we got to this moment, this makes no sense. So with books, obviously I have beta readers, so
Yes.
mine are my parents, the English teachers.
Really?
uh,
Come on.
yeah,
What
yeah,
was that
yeah.
like? Wait, we have to go back for a second because I have to understand because I have two kids and my son is writing essays for college.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and I'm like, "Hey, Luke, do you want me to read your essay?" He goes, "Oh no, I'm good, Dad." I'm like, you really? You don't want me to take a look at it?" He
I,
goes, "No, no, I'm
you're like,
Yeah.
a writer and he could take advantage of the wealth
So,
of knowledge.
but finally he came around. But I have to be very careful in terms of walking him through any ideas or changes. And if I'm too forceful, he just shuts down. And goes, "I'll deal with this later." So that's why I'm curious. And my daughter, she doesn't show me anything. She just writes her own, and that's it. I'm not going to show you unless she's under a deadline for homework and she's stuck and she really needs to get it done for the next day.
Yeah.
But how were your parents, and how did you? How,
Yeah, I mean, so they're for. I guess it might not always work for people if your parents are, high school English teachers. But in my case, because they're very good high school English teachers, they're good teachers. So, and I think just I'm an only child, and so I was there. They like, oh, this is an interesting idea. Hey, Adrienne, have you heard of it? Interested, like not even just when it comes to writing, just like there was always a lesson to something, or just did you see that over there? That's actually a reference to that, or everything sort of growing up was there was some sort of educational component. And then I guess having them look over my schoolwork growing up, it's sort of just the next step.
so they were
And
really, you felt they fostered your work and your homework and your creativity, and you didn't really bump up against them as much as you embraced, or the stylistically, because they were good teachers,
yeah,
and turned out to be good parents. That's what you're
yeah,
saying.
they're good at being harsh, I guess. Is sort of the point.
Really?
I mean, so the good thing about, I mean, there's a lot of good, my parents are amazing. The good thing about my parents when it comes to this is they are very honest, but they try really hard to not, be brutally. I don't really believe in brutal honesty. I'm not, once in a blue moon, it I guess serves its purpose, but generally it sort of keeps people back and then less wanting to hear, right? And they've always been very good at being that teacherly, like, okay, so I'm not sure this bit works, Adrienne, and I'll tell you why. But because they were so supportive of all my creative endeavors and very proud and impressed by me, which is nice, it also meant that I had confidence in what I was doing. So even though it always hurts from anyone, editors or your parents, to hear this isn't quite working or I didn't like this bit, that will always be like, dagger.
Yeah.
I also had the confidence and the upliftness that generally my work is good. So you keep moving forward. And also to the point, well, now, because they still read my stuff, well, since my first book, Alex, I'm like, no, I disagree. I want to keep going with this. So I've also had that relationship where I'm able to, it's not, we're the parents, therefore we're right, you're wrong. It's always been a conversation.
Right. So
So
you're equals. Well, you're equals when it comes to the creative process.
yeah, maybe when I was a little younger, I probably couldn't have fought like, no, that's how that word is spelled. No, no, it's but now, yeah, and it's great. But of course now, so I have, my parents who I like to have read, and then my agent, who you've met.
Yes.
We have pictures
She's
at
great, by the
parties
way.
together. And she's wonderful. She's not all agents necessarily edit, and they don't necessarily want to, but she's very good. And we've been together. Oh, now I'm pausing,
A
doing that
long
horrible,
time. A long time.
like over a decade,
Yeah.
probably closer to 15 years. She knows my work inside and out. I really respect her thoughts. And again, it's the same vibe. It's like this, yes, yes, yes. I think I'm
R-
going to keep that.
Right.
Yes, like that,
I
that
mean,
sort
that's
of
that's
thing.
what a good editor does. I remember
Yeah.
my editor, she made a point of saying, okay, this is your book, and I love everything that you're doing. Now I'm going to send you a couple of suggestions. So after softening me up, then the suggestions come, and they're page after page. But, you know,
Yeah.
she was
I think it's
effective.
called the sandwich method. It's you offer
Yes.
praise at the beginning, then you give your critique, and
Yeah.
then you end with praise at the
Yeah.
end. It's like a legit
Yeah.
technique
It
that
was
I've
the,
definitely had editors use on me as well. If
yeah.
everybody, my parents, agents,
Yeah.
everybody, friends,
Yeah.
you're like, are you sandwich techniquing me right now? Like, no, I really do like him. Like, did you, or do you
Yeah.
just want
Yeah.
to get to the
How
critique?
much turkey is between that bread? That's what I really
Yes,
know.
exactly.
How
I prefer
thick is
a
that
lot of bread.
sandwich?
I like my carbs.
Let me ask you,
Um,
what do you recall, like the first thing that you wrote that was really satisfying, that gave you that start of confidence, whether it was something in school or a short story or even a play? Was there a moment that, you said, I think I want to do this and I can do this?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so gosh, I'm going to do one of Adrienne's long-winded answers for this. From birth, I have no clue when my dad specifically, but my mom as well, but with his creative writing, thing, started teaching me creative writing. But basically, from birth, it feels like I've had confidence in my storytelling ability. And whenever in, English class in elementary school, writing stories, was always my thing. I always got really good grades on, I had all the validation in the world. I did a book with a friend, and she and I were both known for our creative writing. And it was so popular that like the principal got a copy of it in their office, so I've always had that validation. And then throughout high school, doing creative writing classes. But in high school, my last year, I wrote a play for a playwriting class. And it was probably one of the first like one act plays, not like a scene or, like a proper sort of
Hmm.
structured play that I wrote that was chosen. We had a student run, it was a very artsy school, a student run one act play festival. And so all the people, producers, directors, writers, actors, crew, everybody were students. One of my friends, we were all in our last year of high school, he was chosen to be a director. And once he was chosen as a director, I'm like, oh, he's going to choose my play because I know him. So like, I know this is his style of humor. So I knew he was going to choose it. And when he did it, I was cast in the first play. There were 3 plays. So I was there every night and I would sit at the back of the audience for the third play, which was mine, to just listen to it being performed. And what we were talking about earlier, when you write something and you hope to get an effect, like a
Mm.
cause and effect, when people laughed at the jokes that like right on cue, as if they were like being directed to, I just was like, is this a better feeling than acting? I still don't have the answer, but it was really up there. So I became really interested in playwriting at that point, not so much novel writing. Then I go through drama school for university. In my last year of theater school at the University of Toronto, I did another playwriting class, and I did it, and it was taught by this incredible Canadian playwright, Janet Sears, who I'd studied already. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna be my teacher. And it was this great, intimate, 7 people. You had to audition, quote unquote. You had to send, writing samples to get into the class. And the way she structured it was amazing. And it was just great. All the other students, we bonded, we got on great. The play I wrote, again, the assignment was a one-act play. And we had these tutorials sort of halfway through the term as we were in the middle of writing, and we were just chatting. And I was saying, I'm not sure, this might be 2 acts, actually. I don't know. And she was like, with you, Adrienne, if you want to just make this one act of it, because, for the time, we didn't have time for me to write a full play. If you want to be one act for a 2-act play, I'll let you do this because I think you're really good at this. And I think I know how much you like acting, but I hope you keep writing as well. And I hope you said, because you're very good at this too. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. I don't know. I just remember the moment. And this is what you asked. Was there like that moment? Up until that tutorial session, I really was just like, yeah, I love to write creatively, and I guess
Hmm.
I'm good at it, but don't we all like to write creatively? I don't know, it just felt like this random, like, yeah, whatever, we all do this, we all have fun, it's great, isn't this great fun? And I guess it was the first time a true professional had called me out as having some sort of skill that was at a certain level that I wasn't aware of myself.
Well, those are
And
really
that, sorry, yes.
Well, I was just going to say those are really clear moments because obviously, as the way that you were describing, coming out of the womb almost with a pencil and a
Yeah.
notebook, and dad saying, "Let's get to it." It was just part of your, who you are.
Yeah.
But we all need that validation or that moment really clear where you see the audience responding as if somebody said, "Hey, by the way, the writer's in the audience, so make sure you laugh at these 5 places," which which is just, remarkable. And then of course, yeah, having a professional validate.
It was everything. And it really, I turned my focus to playwriting after that. which sounds like this massive, Adrienne focused on playwriting. But what happened was I did so many theater schools. I went to LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts in London, England. And I did a year classical acting specific program. And after that, I was trying to write some plays to like direct or, produce. And I kept having trouble. So I decided to write a kidlit novel because I really love reading kidlit novels, and just as a way to sort of refresh my brain and like, all right, let's completely cleanse the palate, write a kidlit novel. And I did. It took a year. I actually, like, I'd never actually written more of a novel than 18 pages. Everything I'd ever written had been
Wow.
18 pages, and I'd give up. And I don't know why 18. I don't know what happens on page 18, but I would just be like, ugh, I'm not interested. So I kept writing and writing and writing. And that ended up being my first published novel, Alex and the Ironic Gentleman. So what was supposed to be sort of an interlude then sent my career and my whole life, forget like just everything about my life, in a completely unexpected direction, which was being, a writer of novels, which I had, again, it sounds so like, it's actors who just sort of accidentally become actors, and now they're the lead in something because, they looked right, or they had, I get so jealous of because of these years and years I've told you about of
Right.
theater training. And I never want to give that impression as an author that I just sort of tripped into it. And I think telling the history of coming out of the womb, learning how to write, it's like it's been there the whole time. But it really was a sudden change in trajectory, because everything in my head at that point was theater, theater, theater. Write a play, direct a play, act in a play. And then Alex came along and woof.
But if you were in London, which is a very demanding place when it comes to literature and theater, and that school is renowned, and I'm assuming you writing adult plays or plays about young adults at the time? Because
I was writing, they were entirely adult. They were sort of absurdist with some shocking moments of violence in them.
okay.
But I was really into sort of, and I still am into absurd things. So that I actually took the absurdity thing into the book with Alex and the Ironic Gentleman. It was very, very classic children's adventure, episodic adventure, very inspired by Alice in Wonderland. Just that she has, her main through line of trying to go home, but then she has all these weird adventures and meets all these weird individuals and has these mini adventures with them. I really structured, especially the second act, on Alice in Wonderland that way. I think Act 1 was more Roald Dahl-y. And then Act 3 was very piratey. So I don't know, Peter Pan or Treasure Island or, but yeah, I had gone from writing total adult stuff to complete, like not even YA. I skipped young adult and went right to middle grade, right to like 8 to 12. Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, I want to thank you for getting back on brand, because this is an All Things Alice podcast, and I am going to ask you about your Alice experiences and when you first met her. But I'm interested in, you said that you read a lot of kids' stories growing up, or just as an adult to relax. So can you kind of share with us some of those stories?
I could talk about kidlit for forever. So I'm what's called a reluctant reader, which is a term that wasn't around when I was actually a kid, and that given that label, which is unfortunate because it's tricky to be the daughter of two English teachers and not really want to read. So my parents had to do everything to convince me to pick up books. But when I read a book and when I picked one up, I was a voracious reader. Reluctant readers don't have comprehension issues. It's not. There are other types of readers who have, who might be dyslexic or have other needs in order to find the book for them. But reluctant reader is really just someone like me who's like, I'd rather play with my friends or watch TV or see a play, right? So when I read a book and I was into the book, I'd read it, in a day. I would just devour it, and then I'd have to read everything by that author because I trusted that I would like that author. But even as an adult, I'm sort of that same way. If I read an adult book, I'm still like, I don't know, man. I don't think I'm going to like it. And I don't know why. I should come very positive. So growing up, some of the first books that my parents really pushed on me to try to get were the Beverly Cleary Ramona books.
Okay.
Maybe they saw a bit of Ramona
Uh-huh.
in
That makes
me,
sense. Okay.
possibly. They're also very entertaining and they're really a really easy, fun read. My dad also really loved growing up. So these are old books. The adventure books by Enid Blyton,
Mm-hmm.
which there are some elements that don't fully stand the test of
Time,
time.
right?
It's not but the adventure part of it, I really really glommed onto. And then as I got a little older, Judy Blume. But at the same time, my dad would read to me every night, so that was also something.
Oh,
So he
okay.
would read, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, The Hobbit, and then all of Lord of the Rings. Can you imagine
Wow.
someone reading all of Lord of the Rings? And he did all the voices too. Um,
Come
he
on. Come
yeah,
on.
no,
That
no.
was your
I mean,
childhood? A dad
yeah,
who
he
could do
was
all the
very,
voices? Oh, well, that just clarifies everything. Come on.
uh, and he would also he introduced me to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when I was probably like 12, 13, which changed everything in my brain. That really introduced the notion of absurdity and that kind of humor that just, I don't know, tickled me, and just such a specific, I'm like, this is everything I like. And that's probably been one of like the greater influences. But I kept, well, as I got older, and why I was a young adult sort of existed. It didn't exist as an actual named category, but there were books that featured older protagonists that weren't adult, but really there wasn't that large of a category. So you kind of jumped to adult. And there were some adult books I enjoyed. I enjoyed Michael Crichton and Agatha Christie. I enjoyed books that had really forward moving stories, right? But a lot of adult books I found were, I don't know, depressing. And like the arcs that the characters go on, that by the end you're like, oh, that's sad. And it wasn't really till close to, again, my last year of high school, where we were assigned in English, we could write a sort of a thesis comparing to any two books. And I was like, well, I think I like kids' books better. So I chose Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan. And I really sort of dug into those. And as I was writing it, I sort of realized what I liked. And I actually think that the movie, the Pixar movie Inside Out also is like when I saw that movie, I'm like, that's my thesis
Yeah,
statement.
I love that
That
movie.
obviously
Yeah.
came out later, but the idea like with these kids books is you're still dealing with big issues, you're still dealing with strong emotions, like they're very human. And anyone who thinks that there aren't big issues or in kidlit, they haven't read any kidlit, like they're just being snobs, right? The emotions are these saturated colors, hence my Inside Out reference, these very saturated colors. And they're not quite as messy. By the end of the Inside Out movie, they start seeing that the little glowing balls have more than one color in them as she's getting older, heading towards puberty, and that's wonderful. But that's also why I like middle grade. I like these saturated feelings, and regardless of how dark it gets, and some of them get very dark, and I like to go to dark places in my books, they always end on a hopeful note with
Right.
middle grade. Not always YA, not, but with middle grade, there's always that hope. And I think, as cynical as I can get with the world or whatever, I am at the core very optimistic. And
Right.
I just, I believe in hope. So that's why I love reading those books. So I kept reading them after high school, and I was reading, oh gosh, all of them, like a series of unfortunate events, which sounds like it shouldn't have hope, but it has hope. I was reading all of them, all the new ones that were coming out.
I'll have to tell you a quick funny story
Yeah.
about that because I was reading that as well. And I was at a resort. It was kind of a fancy resort, and I was by the
Oh.
pool, and I was reading the first book. And this woman was sitting next to me, and she looked over at me and she goes, "What are you reading?" And oh, I said, "I'm reading this new series. It's," and I show her the cover,
Mm.
and she looks at me like, "What? Isn't that for like elementary kids?" And I said, "No, it's not. Actually, it's it's amazing. You should check it out." But she gave me so much judgment. It was and I was self-conscious after that. I went, "Oh, well, I didn't know people across the pool are going to be judging my book." But that's a dark story and just brilliantly told. And the whole thing that he uses with vocabulary and and spelling out, this is what that means. That's so perfect for kids, but adults can read it and go, "That's so clever."
Yes, I think the best kids books, and likewise kids media, is written and created on two levels, right? It's at least I think this. There's the for the audience it's intended for, let's say the 8 to 12 audience, but also especially with books versus a Pixar film, books are kids books are one of the last places where we still read out loud, where we still have an oral tradition. We don't do it so much with adult books. um, I think audiobooks, the way they've taken off, shows how much we love that. But that communal experience of somebody telling a story is rarer and rarer the older you get. So kidlit, at least, when I write it, I keep in mind that there's going to be a teacher or a parent or somebody reading this to kids. So first of all, I like to have some parent Easter eggs in there, just some little jokes that probably the kids won't get yet. But also when the kids come back to it, they read it when they were 10, 11, they come back to it in their 20s. They're like, oh, I didn't get that joke at the time, right? And I think there's always that nuance and depth, but also, even if there weren't any adult jokes, there's just some great stuff in it. If you like the book is meant for you. That's how I feel. Like this idea of gatekeeping ages. And I have a more controversial opinion, I think, which is I feel that way with adult books with kids. Like there can be some stuff in an adult book that is intense that maybe certain kids shouldn't read, but there are other kids who are ready for it. And as long as you're having a conversation with them, and as long as you're having, I think as a parent or, teachers, talking with the kids and working through possibly more complicated or, things that you're like, oh, did you just read that? Wow. I actually think that's okay. I'm actually
Right.
in favor of that. So yeah, so Kidlit, people judging
Well,
Kidlit
but you
is
you brought up Pixar, and what they do so brilliantly is that it works for kids and adults. And so they
yes.
have that four quadrant thing that they talk about in marketing, that it works
Mm.
for everybody, which is why Harry Potter, became the book that was in the young adult section, and all adults started reading it.
Yeah.
And then it's okay. It's okay to read the stuff. But nevertheless, you brought up Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, both of which on the surface are kids' books, but adults started reading them before any kids probably did. Certainly Alice in Wonderland.
Absolutely. No, and that's the other thing. We in retrospect recategorize things too, right? Like people, categorizing, The Outsiders as YA. And I'm like, I guess it is. I don't know. But that didn't exist. It wasn't I understand a need to find places to shelve things, and I think that's important. But at the same time, I feel like this is, where new adult is becoming a market category, and there's been a lot of conversation about we've lost a category between middle grade and young adult. By trying to put labels on things, we can sometimes this is such a by putting labels on things, we can exclude things. And I think that's just something we know in general. So there's a benefit to knowing and understanding what a category means and using that in a positive way. But at the same time, there are people I know who are trying to be published who have books that are sort of, the characters are 13, 14, and or even up to 15. And really, we have the 8 to 12 category. And even though 12 and up is the category for YA, they're wanting characters that are 16 plus. So we've like suddenly, because of the need to categorize, we've this I think a wealth of books and writers and stuff are being kind of ignored because, oh, we don't know where to put you on the shelf.
Stories are turned down. I mean, that's what was my problem is I was turned down by everybody in the States because the lead character started off as 7. The next time we see her, she's 12, and then she's 18. And it was, after Harry Potter, and everybody said, well, I don't know where this fits and who did you write it for? And I didn't know that there were categories, and the categories were just coming into shape. They were just finding there was definitely now young adults. There wasn't middle grade. there was children. So it was
Yeah,
children,
it was called children, but it would included much younger children.
much younger, and I think categorizing middle grade is smart because after going to a lot of schools, school visits, those those 6, 7, 8 year olds, they're looking for somebody to aspire to that's not a teenager. So
Yeah.
if you have a 13-year-old character, that's pretty spot on. And they do the lion's share of the reading. They have more time.
Yes.
So
And you have teachers and librarians who are reading to them and introducing it, which we don't have that as much in high school. And we certainly don't get opportunities as adults. I feel like when people become, I'm not a parent myself, but like when people become parents, they get that opportunity again and they get excited. They get, yay, we get to go to the library and have
yeah,
somebody read to us.
yeah, yeah.
It's like we should organize that for adults. We should have, adult reading time because it's it's something that's in our DNA. We want to sit around the fire and tell stories.
So share with us your Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan because both of these stories have been around a long time, and I'm curious when you wrote your paper if you have a theory on why these stories in particular have lasted so long.
It was sort of a compare and contrast. So in the paper, that wasn't, but I do have ideas beyond the paper. In the paper, I sort of had this theory that we were dealing with two main characters, and I'm making Wendy the main character, who have two completely opposite goals. Then it's not right because like Wendy's scared of growing up, but in the end realizes she has to grow up. Whereas I think Alice is feeling frustrated by the grown-ups and she wants to feel a place to belong as a kid. So it's sort of like one character, is trying to figure out how to grow up in a way that pleases her, and the other one is like, no, I don't want to grow up so fast. I want to stall growing up, kind of thing. Even though weirdly, Wendy does want to stall growing up at the beginning. So it's like a whole, what do the two sort of protagonists want? But I think that question of growing up is probably one of the big reasons they both appeal, because I think we've all had those as kids into preteens into teen. We've all had our own relationship with that. Some people are desperate to get older. Me, I just wanted to be a kid. Teenagers scared me. They scared me when I was a teenager. They still scare me. I respect the heck out of them, but they scare me. So I liked being a kid, and this goes back to the books I liked to read. I didn't want to read angsty teen stuff. I didn't want to really read romances, or I just wanted to read plot-driven adventures. That's all I wanted. Where I definitely had friends who were desperate, when can I wear makeup? When can I, have a boyfriend? When can I be independent? When can I have that? So I think that's very relatable in both of the books. And then on top of that, you have I know they became iconic characters, but they're so iconic. They're so specific. And I've been talking to a lot of kids lately about writing. I'm like, I feel like the more specific you make a character, the more universal, weirdly, it becomes. So you have these incredible, specific Captain Hook, Queen of Hearts, these very meticulously wrought characters who have very specific, aesthetic features and personality traits that just spark so much imagination. And on top of that, for the Alice thing, I think people have always played make-believe with their cards and their chessboards. Like, I think people have always been like, oh, this is the queen, this is the king. Like, I think tapping into like a very, very basic form of make-believe,
right?
Which you also get, I shouldn't just say it's Alice in Wonderland, you get that with pirates, right? You get that with mermaids. You get a lot of classic make-believe stuff that was also particularly popular, I assume, at the time the original play, and then it became a book, was written. Like, this is stuff that kids of that time enjoyed playing, so that made it also relatable. I did not, going back to the growing up thing, I did not realize until, was it Finding Neverland when that came out? You'd think I'd know metaphor better. You'd think as an author, when one of the audience members talks about how the crocodile with the clock, chasing after Hook, and this idea of time chasing after this adult character. what?
Yes.
Mind blown here. But
Yeah.
that's another example of like the question of growing up, the time and all of that. So I think there's so many universal themes in both of them, and then the specificity of the characters, the how enjoyable they are. I don't know, that just stays. I mean, I don't. It's so fun.
And as a kid, I mean, the whole idea of identity and what is my identity and finding as you're talking about this of growing up, I'm trying on these different
Yes. Yeah.
identities is really universal. But what's remarkable since I've been working in the Alice universe is how deeply seated it is in culture, but how Alice is such a muse for creatives. And we never had this conversation. I didn't know that, Alex was inspired by Alice. So Alice has been a muse. How did you use elements? I think you said that it was a bit episodic, but can you tell us a little bit about the book, Alex and the Iconic
Oh,
Gentleman? Right?
it's ironic, but I
Ironic
do like
gentleman. Sorry, sorry,
comic.
sorry, sorry. It should be
I have to
iconic.
say,
It should be iconic. They're all
it should
iconic
be. If I
characters.
rewrote it today, it would probably be iconic. It's so essentially the very basic plot is a girl, Alex, has to rescue her grade 6 teacher from pirates. A larger scale, like she was raised by her uncle, he's been killed. The only adult in her life who sort of is a parental figure is this teacher. So it's sort of it's more than just that. At the same time, she's found a treasure map, which is what these pirates were looking for. So it's also a treasure hunt kind of thing. So Act 1 is establishing everybody and beginning the adventure and having pirates kidnap the teacher and all of that stuff. Act 3, we go to sea. We have the HMS Valiant. We've got our good guys, and then we've got the Ironic Gentlemen, who are the pirates. And we go to sea, and we have a proper like Treasure Island style Peter Pan
Wow.
style adventure there. But Act 2, Act 2 is very much Alice in Wonderland. So Act 2 is she has to get to the town. Here's a fun, all the plays on words. She has to get to Portcullis, which is a port town, which is where she's trying to get a boat. So the journey from her town to Portcullis, that's the Alice bit. And it's very much Alice in Wonderland. She's thrown into a very absurd world, even though it's her world is absurd. Everything is very episodic, and generally it starts with a very strange train sequence that's my Beckett existential absurdist what my very first play was styled, that sort of Waiting for Godot's circle that never ends, that I find horrifying and deeply amusing at the same time. So it starts with that, and then she ends up being plopped, guess where? In a forest. Then in this forest, she comes across different people who are absurd, sort of caricature type people, or in one case, an extremely ginormous octopus. He's a very, he's a older English lush style actor, but as an extremely ginormous, picture like Peter O'Toole.
Peter O'Toole, I was just going to say that.
Was an extremely ginormous octopus, and she has to sort of help solve problems in order to move on to the next step, which is yet another person that needs another thing. And so basically she's trying to get to point B, but she keeps getting waylaid. And I remember my editor being like, okay, if we're going to do this, it's not very forward moving. So we need to make sure the momentum, like it's the writing, like, cause I write, I have long books, I write a lot and I talk a lot. So just like, let's make sure that we have no extraneous words. We did cut one scene where she meets a French horn player, which I was sad because I used to play French horn, which is why that was in there. but she has these scenes, and for some readers that's their favorite bit, because I think they are like, the Alice like fans at heart, they get it. And then some people are like, oh my god, I just wanted to get to portcullis. They
So
wanted that more straight
yeah,
line.
they wanted, Treasure Island.
Yes, exactly, we get there. I just wanted to do a little bit of
You have
Alice.
Alice. So if you like Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Treasure Island, or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, this is a book for you.
Yes, exactly. If you like all children's, I did call it an homage to children's. I mean, it was the first book I ever finished writing. It's the first children's book I ever wrote. So I very much wrote everything was an homage. Everything was something else. I put friends. There are friends in it. Previous employers were in it. Generally tried to represent everyone nicely. I didn't, but I was living with three other people. We all shared a house. So they were all actors as well, and they're all in it. They're all crew for the HMS Valiant. They all chose their own names. I was like, okay, guys, I'm putting you in here. This before I had, I didn't know
It's
it was
like
being published.
like you have like a theater company, like a book club, and you're saying, okay, everybody, come here, read these scenes, and tell me what names you want. It's
Like,
a
no,
collaboration.
I let them. I didn't even give. I like you choose. They
Oh,
just
okay.
Yeah, one kid, one guy, one of them, I think, yeah, it was Stephen chose Shakespeare. I'm like, all right, your character's name is Shakespeare. And then when it got published, or when I got the publishing deal, they were still in theater school because they were doing like the longer course. So I got to sleep in. They had to get up early in the morning, basically, and they reported back after, like the morning after we had found out. They said that they were in the kitchen all together, jumping up and down. We're going to be in a book. We're going to be in a book. And I'm like, you are, and they are. So it was just everything I love in a book, not thinking it would be published, not even thinking about publishing. And then, of course, the challenge of realizing you have to write a second book, which I think is a more challenging thing. I think writing a first book is hard, but you're so focused on this crazy, huge accomplishment, like this thing that you've wanted to do, and you're setting yourself like, I have this goal and it might take me 10 years, but I'm going to do it, and putting everything I've got into this thing. And then, you get published, and then you start to have a career, and somebody asks you for a second one. You're like, but I can't do what I did with that. Like, I can't do that all over again.
I thought it was exactly the opposite because
Oh, really?
there was something about the first one in terms of not having any pressure because you don't think it's going to get published.
Yeah.
And then yes, you can take 5, 10 years, however long it takes. However, once it's there and you've figured out the kind of the rules and the logic and all, then yes, there's a pressure, but there's so much of it's already a roadmap, and I found
Yes.
it much easier, and certainly took me a lot shorter time. I did feel pressure from the editors that a little bit more, but I was happy that I had already established, okay, if they like this world, I've been working on it. I have all this stuff in a filing cabinet. I'll just pull more stuff.
But see, therein is the difference. And I don't know why I did this to myself. Maybe like I've now written some series, but generally, like I always enjoyed standalones. I decided for the second book, I was going to write a completely different story, set in the
Oh,
same world, but completely different characters, completely different story. And
oh.
then halfway through, we would bring Alex back into it and stuff. So I think writing a direct sequel has its unique challenges, which is, especially people really like the first one. It's like, oh no, how do I make this as liked, if not more liked than the next? How do I write the second book but don't rest on my laurels? Like, still like there's a lot of challenges with that. But I think for me, because I decided I'm going to write a second book that's completely not
Mm.
the first. I felt again like I was starting a bit from scratch. So
Yeah,
I think that
well,
might have been
that's for sure. I mean,
part.
if you have a new lead character, well then yeah. But wait a second, because you have a whole new series out. You have 3 books in the Bendy series, right?
Yeah, well, the Bendy and then the Explorers, which is oh, so here's the thing. The Bendy books are a series, but they're also standalones. So we've done it again. But the Explorers, which is just mine, it's nobody's IP, is is a proper baby's first actual, like with like sequel, like it's a 3-book series. You kind of like, it ends cliffhangery. It's a proper series.
Okay, so how do you walk us through that? Because what I mean is, when you started writing it, you knew that you were going to have a trilogy.
Yeah. So it was a 3-book deal from the beginning, and the way it had been pitched and the way it had been struck, just from the beginning, it was a very classic, like, you know, hoping that each book is their own contained adventure, but it
Yes.
had that very classic overarching arc that was they have to collect things, they have to rescue somebody by the end, sort of
And
thing.
were they saying we want the book to come out every year or every 18 months? So did you have that added pressure or how?
Yeah, it was classic, classic. I think, was it every year, 18 months? I can't remember even what it was, but it was definitely that, so that window where you had to, then write the whole next book
Yeah.
and then go through the whole process again and write it, in time, with their deadlines and
I
whatnot,
found
for
that
sure.
very stressful, by the way, hitting a deadline for the book.
Yeah.
I thought, because they said you're going to lose your audience. They're going to find some other series. Okay.
That
Like,
is such,
yeah.
why would they say that's so much? I'll tell you, you want to talk timeline though.
Yes.
Well, these books, the Bendy books, each of the sequels. So there's one book in the Bendy books that's not like technically a YA, even though it's in the YA section, because it's a memoir. It's sort of an in-game. In the very first game, there's a book called The Illusion of Living, which is Joey Drew, who is the Walt Disney of this studio, of this animation studio, Joey Drew's memoir. And so they wanted the memoir. So it was a really cool experience writing a memoir.
Hmm.
Um, about an adult male, for a young adult section. But these 3 books, the other the ones that are technically YA, less of the pressure that you're talking about, like that just blows my mind. You're going to lose your audience. That just, who says that? But like that kind of pressure. It's when the developers decided they wanted the next book, and I guess they would talk to Scholastic about it, then Scholastic would come to me, and then I'd have, oh, you have to get this to us in 2 months. Like, it suddenly would
Wow.
be that level of fast, but it
Wow.
wasn't the same way as writing a series where they're like, we need the next book ASAP. For the series, it was more like, when we're ready for the next one, we got to go kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Okay, so just let the listeners. So this is based on a video game, and they needed these books for day and date of releasing when a new game or something was coming out. Is that, or was it?
I think I don't actually know. I don't fully know what the decision making process is on their end. I'm just happy to to be a part of it. Yeah, because the games all came out before. So the second game released this time last year.
Okay.
So I think it's possible that when they sort of finished working on the game, they were like, okay, actually now we would like another book. Like, they were so focused on the game, as they should be, that then they thought, oh, you know what, it would be good. But it was a year from basically being told we'd like another book. So that's even before I've written an outline to send to them. I mean, this whole process, to send to them. It was a year from that point to the release of, so the most recent one, this time last year, I would have been knee deep in writing it. Fade to Black came out, oh, not so much. It came out at the beginning of October. And I don't think I had started writing it last year at the beginning of October.
Okay, so let me just get all these titles right. So
Yes, okay.
Bendy and the Ink Machine, Dreams Come to Life. That was
Yes.
2019. That was book 1.
Yes.
And did you audition for this, meaning send in an outline, and based on the outline they were choosing writers, or did you have a pre-existing relationship? How did that happen?
That one, yeah. So that one is sort of yes to the first thing of those different. So I think they reached out to about maybe 4. There were other authors, and they had this this is not a visual medium. I am doing very small pinchy things with my fingers right now, showing very, very little. They had very little that they were required. They wanted it to be YA. They wanted it to be set in the studio. The games take place after decades after the studio is over. So essentially they wanted it set in the 1940s. And that's about it. And then I came back saying, well, I think I'd like to do an apprentice who's like 17, who's works in the art department, because obviously this is a very visual, the whole point of this game is art. So let's put him in the art department. And they were like, yeah, we like that too, that we were literally thinking the exact same thing. We wanted somebody working as an apprentice in the art department, like, great. And then at that point, I think all of us who, you know, they had asked, wrote pages, and then you know this about me, I write a lot. So I think they wanted maybe about 5. And I'm like, can I submit 15? Am I allowed to submit 15? And they're like, okay, but no more than 15. So I did the opening, which is stayed almost entirely the same, the opening of Dreams Come to Life. And I guess they liked it, which was very nice. So
that's
there
great.
you go.
So then you wrote Bendy, the Illusion of Living, right? And that was, is that right?
I think, yeah, The Illusion of Living was the second one. Yeah.
And then the third one is Bendy and the Ink Machine. No, the Lost
It's
Ones.
the last one.
Oh, so the title of the whole thing is Bendy and the Ink Machines, and then the Lost Ones or Dreams Come to Life. And okay,
Yeah, so essentially what I think
got it.
happened was that because they hadn't finished game 1, I was working on the first book before they had finished game 1. Game 1 finished before the book came out. But it was Bendy and the Ink Machine. So they were ing all the titles, but then they realized they wanted the second book, the second game, which has a different title. So that's why after Bendy and the Ink Machine Dreams Come to Life, it's all Bendy.
I see.
Creatively.
Got it.
Bendy.
Got it.
So it's, yeah.
And also, it was published through Scholastic, which is great because they
Yes.
have such a far reach, and they were your original publishers as
Yes,
well.
they
So
were the ones who published Alex. Going back to that, they were the very first.
wow.
Yeah.
So you're keeping it in the family. That must have been nice. Did they have an editor that they assigned to these books?
Yeah, well, so what's fascinating in this, it's all working beautifully, because it's what I was saying about reluctant readers. They have an imprint called AFK, which means away from keyboard. For those who don't know your acronyms, which I did not.
That's
the very
smart.
cool, like, online acronyms. And it's been around for a while. I think, I don't know which they did first, but they're Five Nights at Freddy's books, which is massive. I mean, the movie just came out.
Yeah, and it was huge, huge.
It's huge.
And it shocked everybody.
Yeah.
We're actually meeting with the directors for this project I have at Warner Brothers this week.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
So knock on wood, break a leg. That's
Yeah,
also
thank
very
you.
exciting.
Thank
That's
you.
very cool. And a good team. But yeah, I don't know when they actually started the imprint, or whether it was on the back of how successful the Five Nights at Freddy's stuff was, but they do all these video game tie-ins through AM. So there's a publisher for it, and then my editor, who was senior editor, Chloe, who left to work properly within video games. So now my editor is Lori, and the editors have all been incredible. And and so it's been great. So it's a very focused, but what I really like about it, beyond just it's fun, is that because they have this imprint that's all focused on video game tie-in stuff, you're getting all these readers like me, reluctant readers, who might not be into a book, going, well, that is my favorite video game. And I get all the time from kids and teenagers who are like, I hate books, which is like,
yes.
Oh, okay. Or I don't like reading, or, like, I've never really read a book, but I read this one because I love Bendy, and it was really good, and I really liked it. And my hope is then that, sparks that realization, there are books for me. I just have to find them. They might not be what even the school's showing me, but somewhere there are books for me. And so as the reluctant reader, I really, really love that. And I love being able to, I put a lot into everything I write. And it's so fun to read certain reviews of people who are just like, with the memoir, like somebody on Goodreads was like, the author didn't have to go this hard word on like it's like an in-world. I'm like, no, I did. I have to get themes. I have to get morals. I have to get complicated questions of ethics. And I love that I'm able to do that and sort of sneak that stuff into these books. And then next year they're adapting the first one, Dreams Come to Life, into a graphic novel, which I'm also super into. I've got a graphic novel of my own that's coming out in like 2025 because it takes forever.
Ever for the art.
Yeah, it's like 250 pages, and this incredible artist Jade, who I'm working with, she has to illustrate 200. I don't know how she's doing. To me, it seems fast. But they're releasing Dreams Come to Life as a graphic novel next year. And again, I love that because I think graphic novels also opens the world of reading even more.
Are you adapting your own book, the prose, as the graphic novel, or they're hiring somebody else to do that?
They've hired a writer named Christopher Hastings, who's done this a
Okay.
fair bit. He does his own work as well. And when I was first told, there was a part of me was like, oh, I could do it, but they probably already have somebody, but I could. And then I thought, no, even though I know how to write a script because I have my book coming out, and I really enjoy writing a graphic novel script. It comes with its own series of challenges, though. Oh my goodness, how on earth do you make that book that's like, gosh, how many pages? Like 300 some odd. Oh, it's almost 296 into a graphic novel. Like that's so much. Even if it's got the same number of pages, it's not going to be that same length, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't think I would know where to cut, what to do,
Right.
how to do it. So no, the answer is absolutely not.
Well, let's go
And
to let's go to your graphic novel because that's fascinating and that's great. I wrote my prose and then I had no idea what I was doing, and then I did a graphic novel, and I
yeah,
look back on it and go, wow, I made so many mistakes in setting up this story so terribly, but it was really, really fun to do it, and now I understand how different it is, and you just alluded to how complicated and different it is.
yeah.
Can you kind
Well,
of speak to that, writing your first graphic novel, and do you use a template from Final Draft, or how do you go about it?
it's funny. Oh my goodness, we were accidentally just doing this amazingly like like ties into what we talked about earlier, kind of like
Mm,
conversation, because it really goes back to playwriting. I wondered, because I've gone into screenwriting, I've done some screenplays, and I've done some projects here and there using Final Draft, which I find I'm like, this is amazing. I just hit return and it knows what I need. But as I was approaching this, I was like, I don't think I could do this unless I totally reprogrammed what Final Draft had. Oh my goodness, I'm writing a play. I had to go back to sort of just, I do it. I'm sure every playwright has a different thing, but I do it in Word and Microsoft Word. And so the way I know, but just the way that one writes a graphic novel is you have page numbers, like specific pages that you have to dictate. And then what happens is in specific panels on those pages. And that is what is so challenging. I
yes.
love it. I think very visually to begin with. So, and I've read a lot of graphic novels. So, I sort of felt very comfortable with playing around with how to use the space and what to do. And not just like, here are these many panels. I have a friend, Stephanie Cook, has a lot of kidlit graphic novels out now, who also is an editor, and she does tons with graphic novels and the comics community in general. So we met up. And I'm like, help me. And
Yeah.
she was the one who advised for middle grade, generally, you don't want more than 5 panels on a page, just very pragmatic things like that. Were very, very helpful. But generally, I had a good vibe. I had a good sense of aesthetic, I think. Jade, if you're listening, please agree. But what I didn't know until I was going back over it myself and then working with an editor on it was how hard editing a graphic novel is. Because in a book, even a screenplay or a play, but in a book, if they're like, you know what, we need an extra bit of dialogue right here just because we don't fully understand what's happening, or can we add an extra section where we get
Yeah. A
a bit
couple
of
of
motivation, or
paragraphs, right?
yeah, just something you're like, sure, I'll put it here. Here's the thing. You add a single thing to a graphic novel script, and it's like, it's Tetris. It's like all the, you add another panel. Well, then that fifth panel has fallen off the page. Can I fit it into the next page? Or can I make this page 6 panels? Or do I need that panel? Maybe I can get rid of that panel and keep that. Or do we move everything boom, 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 down? But of course, there are 2 page spreads, and you have to make sure that you have, I guess, so it's 1, 2, so 2 and 3, page 2 and 3 side by side. It can't be, 3 and 4, because that's opposite sides of page. It's
Right.
math. It's
Right.
all
Yeah.
math.
And
And
yeah,
oh,
and every page you add is hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the artist
mhm.
because they get paid by the page. So unless you make a deal with them where they're part of the authorship, and so I found that really really challenging as well. But the heavy lifting is the artist. So once you get the flow of it, would you agree that yes, and also the artist can say, hey, I can't fit all those panels, or there's so much dialogue in this particular panel, we're gonna have to move it around a little bit. I was really leaning on Ben Templesmith. I go, dude, I have no idea what you can fit on the page. I don't even, so I'm gonna leave it up to you. And he goes, no, this seems okay. I go, no, don't tell me that, because that can't be okay, because I don't know what I'm doing. So,
Well, I feel like in general, honestly, I don't know. I feel either, I mean, I've given so much of such challenges to Jade. So it's this story, it's called Ghost Circus. And it's, these 2 kids, and there's a ghost circus. I mean, if that's not obvious from the title. And so we meet these ghosts at the circus. And
not in the hat box.
no, no, no,
Oh,
no ghosts in the hat box
oh
this time.
no,
No,
is
there,
it no? Okay, it's in the circus, not the hat box.
yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
just
But
I
there is a ghost hat sequence. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, so then there are flashbacks to how the ghosts became ghosts. And they're set in all different time periods, right? And so she's drawing like 1930s New York, and then the savannah with elephants, and like just like she's the challenge. I'm like, I don't know plus just the story, the timeline we're in with the ghost circus itself and all the characters there. It's so impressive. But generally it's been pretty honestly good. I feel like, I don't know whether or not she had issues or whether she solved them. I think there's 1 or 2 times I'll see, like, she'll do something with a couple panels where I'm like, oh yeah, 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 that makes more sense. But I think maybe just because I was so aware of the middle gradeness of it all, I think that was very forefront of my mind. So like the number of panels I needed per page, and I needed to make sure. And then before even Jade came on board, editing it and working on with the editor, I guess she was maybe already on board, but she wouldn't have started doing the art yet, I guess. Working on edits with him, he sort of maybe was doing the job that you were saying that like that Ben was doing for
for for
you.
me, yeah.
He'd be like, this is too much dialogue, Adrienne. We're not going to be able to fit that dialogue on a panel. And I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. And that's where the math came in.
Yeah.
That's where I was like,
Yeah.
how do I move this around to? Uh, it was an incredible learning curve. I'll tell you that.
But being a playwright, you really had a handle because that is the closest, that form is the closest to writing for graphic novels, I
A
think.
100%, 100%. And thank goodness I had that experience. I don't know somebody, I mean, you'd have to, I guess, because I did look at other people's scripts. Like I made sure I wanted to learn, like, even just as simple as like page 1, panel 1, and then like how that works. Like, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So, I mean, definitely it's great to have that resource to look at what other people have done. But it didn't feel awkward because it comes from such a playwriting, and it looked like a play. Like, aesthetically, I'm like, oh, this is so nice.
We're doing the same thing. My wife and I are working on a graphic novel, and this is her first graphic novel, but she had been a staff writer on the show Bones, and
Mm.
so she sort of understands, but we were having the simplest question she was saying. So, okay, on the one page, is it panel 1 to 4 or 5, and then on the page 2 it's 6, do you continue, or is it a new? I go, no, it's just 1 through 4 or 5, and then the next page 1 through 4 or 5, 1 through 4 or 5. We're not.
Such an actual, yeah, that's such an that's a question that makes perfect
Perfect
sense.
sense.
Like
Yeah. Like,
it is, it's not, you're not repeating the same panel.
yeah.
So maybe,
So
yeah, you want to have a number set or
yeah, why
something. Yeah.
why not?
Yeah.
But and
Yeah.
this time we hired an editor from the very beginning, and
Yeah.
said, okay, here's the basis of the story, and then he was saying, you have to have somebody come read it for a sensitivity
Mhm.
reader. And
Yes.
I said, that's a thing? That's a job? They go, yeah,
Yes, it's a
you
job.
really
Yeah.
should do that now because some of the names and some of the things you're talking about don't quite line up based on the story. So we've done that, and it's really a science, as you said. It's a math question, and there is a lot more going on in the world in terms of when you create something to make it, to make sure that it's accessible to all.
Yeah, and I do think it's quite wonderful that because I think I said this the other day actually to I forget in what context, but so like I think we've been using sensitivity readers for a while as authors, reaching out to people we know or asking our friends, hey, do you know somebody who might be able to look over this section because I want to make sure this is as correct and as sensitive as possible. So it's already kind of already existed, but I like that it's sort of been, I don't know, codified. Like
Yeah,
it exists as a
yeah,
proper job. It's something that I think it's more front and center of an awareness, which I think is an important awareness, as opposed to like, oh, maybe I should check. It's like that's on your mind as you're creating. And it's great that publishers, and I guess there are obviously freelancers have access now to sensitive. We had one specifically where'd it go for Fade to Black, because I talk a lot about, so all these books are set just after World War II, but this one's 1953, a bit later. But whenever you write a book that's set after World War II, you have to like, oh no, World War II, that's a thing that happened. That would create a great deal that would have a huge impact on my story, regardless of if it's happening at the time or if it's just happened. And in this one, the dad has PTSD from it, and it's thematically important to the story, and it's the whole story is actually kind of about PTSD and mental health and that sort of living with that sort of trauma. And I did my level best. I have personal experience, but I also researching and just trying to make things as sensitive and as authentic as possible. But we did with Scholastic. They gave it to somebody to read over just to make sure that we were doing it right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought it was beta readers because you would get quite a few beta readers and they could point things out. But I agree with you. The level of subtlety is really different, and it's important that we're mindful. So
Yeah.
so we've done that, and in particular because the story and the characters and they all come from different places. We wanted to make sure that we were honoring everybody's heritage and getting it right.
Yeah.
So did you are you interested in World War II much after doing
I
research and
I yes. Yes. The answer is yes. But it's one of those things that I think maybe it's by virtue of being like a cinephile. There's just so many movies about World
yeah,
War II that you can't help but then, and it also directly has impacted. I mean, it's crazy to think it's less and less, but for my generation, your grandparents, right? So
yeah,
it's a very present thing. It's still very much there, I think, at least for my age, like growing up and history and everything like that. It's a very, you've got a real direct connection versus perhaps other history that feels like it's almost a story. It's not
right.
like you don't have that visceral connection, which is why I think I might have struggled with other history classes and other history. And it wasn't really until I started doing art history where you could actually go and see the actual works and connect the reality of it, that I realized I did like history. I just needed to consume it differently. And
Mm,
so one way I really enjoyed is there's a lot of phenomenal, I mean, I guess they all sort of started like BBC, but YouTube, lots of great shows that are about the domestic side of history. So, a day in a life of Victorian. What did you
Right.
eat? Where did you sleep? How did you, sometimes it's a reality show where you send people have to live for a week, and I could not do it. I would be cold. I would be itchy. I would be so itchy. And I would not be able to handle that. I can't do wool. Like I can't. So it would be the worst. So, and I think that's actually part of what's with the first one. They wanted it just after World War II. So I was like, yeah, okay. And I had been to New York recently. I like to go to New York. We've hung out in New York. And I'd gone, every time I go to New York, I asked somebody, give me one museum, because I'm never there for super long. Give me one museum that I haven't been to yet to go to. And somebody recommended the Tenement Museum in the Lower East Side. I was like, okay. And it's this fantastic, they found this sort of boarded up tenement that hadn't been renovated, it hadn't been touched. And from there, they started reaching out. They looked at census information. They started reaching out to families, like down, generationally, like, hey, do you have anything you can give us? Any stories, or do you have any actual physical objects or anything from the time that this was, boarded up? So what it's become is you go on these tours with about 20 people max, and they're like maybe 4 or 5 different kinds of tours because there's different apartments. And you just walk through. It's like, it's like just walking through history, but you're there, right? And you're seeing everything, and you're touching, and it was incredible. And after that visit, shortly thereafter, I got the gig, and they said, after the 1940s, and I was like, okay, and we'll make it New York and all this. And I was like, I know where my character lives. I know where he lives. And it's that great sort of like, I don't know, as an author, everything that comes to you, even if
Yes,
you don't
is
that moment,
fuel
you're
for
like,
your
oh,
creativity. That's
yeah,
great. You were
yeah.
destined to write these. Are there going to be more books in this series, do you think, or you don't
I
know?
don't,
You just wait to see if
I
they call
don't.
you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a pleasure, and I really enjoy working on them. But it's sort of like, hey, you want to do another? I'm like, oh yes, yeah, sure. And then okay, you've got a very quick timeline. I don't know, but it's one of those things also where I know the developers are very, very focused on like the next
Games, yeah.
games as well. So um, but the
So
fans have been amazing, and they're very, very sweet about it, which I'm grateful, because I was very nervous with a pre-existing fan base. I felt the same way about Hatter, about Hatter Madigan. Because you have a pre-existing fan base. I'm like, I hope, but I had, you were like, we worked together on it. Like I was working, this was a very like I had you that was like, okay, he's like thumbs up. So the fans will probably not divert it or anything.
yeah, that
But
was that was really fun, and I knew I was in good hands when you came up with the idea that Hatter was an insider and not an outsider, and your rationale was that that Harry Potter had done that to such great success, and there'd been a
yeah,
lot of other stories, and that this would make the story in this book unique from the character standpoint. And once you pitched that, I said, "Okay, I'm in." That's a very smart idea, and something that I hadn't thought
Oh,
of.
thank you. That's so, I mean,
So,
I love it. It was so much fun. The world is, God. Well, that's what I find. I mean, I know I'm not interviewing. I could see, I could turn this around and start interviewing you, but like, I just, the creating that world the way that you have, like, and with so much, like literally an encyclopedia, like I have it. I
yeah,
have like the desktop, like literally an encyclopedia of information. I find that so phenomenal and so intimidating as a writer. Like like I said, we literally talked about it. Like I'm sort of very, very much inside, and then
yes.
I research what I need here in my little sphere. If I need a little more from the sphere, I admire that so much. Just the depth of the world building you had, and as we were talking about with Alice in Wonderland, just that's what's so great though about all these adaptations of Alice in Wonderland is everybody's sort of unique perspective. And again, the more specific you can make your adaptation of it, the more like, I don't know, butterfly exciting. You're like, oh, I get it. I get who that is. Oh, that's so clever. You know, like that again, going back to that,
Yeah,
what we
and
were talking.
I was really trying to create a jumping off place, and then, take some of the motifs, and then use that creativity, and create this in this universe. And now, and starting with you, as an author, was sharing the sandbox and seeing what other people can bring to it. And in every conversation I tried to that I had with you and other creatives, it doesn't work unless you bring yourself to it, something unique, which you were able to do, and that's what I'm looking for. And I don't want to be precious. I want to
Oh, yeah.
I actually want to break away a lot more from it than I have, because I've gotten so focused on in a loop of the way that I think about it, that I can't break out of it unless I have another voice. And then in
Mm.
that voice, then I can, kind of collaborate. But I'm like, okay, my kid's going to college. I need more professors.
No, that's so fair. And it's, you were asking me about it, like the adaptation of dreams come to life. Like I think it's I there is no way with the narrowness of focus that I have that I could possibly bring a sort of a unique look at that book, right?
Right.
That a new person adapting it would bring. Yeah, I think yeah, it's it's fun. I like that's the crazy part, isn't it? Like getting to write and make stuff up like as a job. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so
it's kind of
fun.
remarkable. And then, and then you get to, I mean, here are all the things that are amazing. Doing school visits for those reluctant
Mm.
readers, I completely agree, and can echo my own experiences where, there are kids that I never want to read, but you're an amazing author, and you're very dynamic in the same way that you're dynamic in terms of really wanting to break through for kids, that it's exciting, but you have to present it in a way that's exciting.
Yes.
If these kids would say to me, "You're not just going to read from your book, are you?" And I said, "No, I've been
No, no,
drinking."
no, you're fine.
And
And
so
that's why the acting for both of
that's
us.
exactly, no,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
never, it paid off more than in the career. It definitely paid off in school visits. And by the way, 300 seventh or eighth graders are terrifying. So
Oh, oh, yes. Oh,
you need to grab them and hold their attention before you talk about anything to do with writing. They
yes.
have to love you. And then you can work in
Very
something for the English teacher, like how often you have to rewrite the book and things like that. So,
exactly. Editors are like teachers. That's one of the things I
yeah.
do because
It-
they are. You learn a lot, and you actually, if you listen.
So, let me ask you how, because I deal with this, how you balance writing your own work, adapting something, now producing, auditioning. What's the day-to-day balance that you try and, accomplish?
Oh, yeah, I know. What's balance? It's I wish it felt more like a purposefulness that I have a plan and I
Yes.
really stick to it. The truth is it's sort of a little bit flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
I have two and I can't speak to what they are, but I've got two right for hires that just sort of happened this month.
Oh,
and
great.
and so right now balancing
Hmm.
those I feel very good about the plan because they're so vastly different. And anyway, there's a lot of reasons why I can do that. I wouldn't always say yes to doing two right at the same time, but these work very nicely together. They complement each other. But this summer I had sort of no writing anything. I didn't have edits. I didn't have, nothing was sort of that way. So I decided I really wanted to write. I have a middle grade that's much more in the style of like Judy Blume, Beverly. I was talking about those authors earlier. So not sort of fantastical in any way, sort of more coming of age that I'd been really wanting to write for a few years. So I'm like, you know what? This summer, that's what I'm doing this summer. And it takes place over a summer. So it felt like this is right. The temperature, because I'm in Canada, so we only get this much of summer, unlike you.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so, this felt right. And I did that. And that's with my agent, and we'll probably go on submission to publishers in the new year. But I'm glad I did that over that gap, because then these projects came along, and it would be sad because I don't think I would have been able to
To do
balance
both.
the my original work. And I think that's kind of the key, is taking advantage of moments. I guess is sort of like, if you can't plan everything out ahead of time, you can still sort of have a sense of how long a project will take, and that maybe right when that's done is like, all right, that's when I want to do this thing. Or the things that are more in your control, the pet projects that might not have a home or anything yet, right? Or like a screenplay that you're working on, you have to still honor and give space to, and go, yes, now this is the time I'm going to do it.
Right. Right.
Even if there is no deadline being given to you. Producing, so the film that we made, I laughed because it was in 2020. It's just so crazy how long ago, and it came out this summer. But how
So you had a good
movie.
summer. You finished a new book and you had a
I
movie
did,
come out.
and then I had a horror movie come out. But when we were filming it, like all the stuff, pre-production, filming it, and then post was a long post. There was no way you could focus on anything else but it. I was also injured at the time, so that didn't help. I think movie making, and I think you're well aware of this. It can be very just entirely consuming. Like that's
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're on
Um,
set, forget it. You only have so many
yeah,
hours in the day, and then you're going to lose crew and locations. And
exactly. And
that's,
when you're not, so as an actor though, if I was just acting, that would be different, because you have a lot of downtime
yeah.
as an actor on a set. And that's a great time to maybe just get a few words in on the
Yes.
computer, and it's much easier to multitask. But as a producer, as a writer on it, you do not have the same level of free time. And then we were working on it. We did putting together the rough cut to get distribution. Like, oh my goodness, there was a lot of focus.
Well, people don't, I don't, when I asked the question, you said fly by the seat of your pants. And the
Yeah,
reason for that, one of the reasons for that, is so much of the work is speculative. So
yeah,
the focus you need to finish your book that you're not getting paid for in the hopes, or the movie that has enough financing just to get the movie made, but that you're not making any money unless the movie sells. Uh, th- and then depending on how many bills you have to pay, it's like, okay,
yes.
where am I putting my attention? So if I need to pay bills and I need that work for hire stuff, or my pet project, or this movie, let's gamble and see if we have a little payday at the end of it. So it does feel like it's when you're doing so many different mediums, like you fly by the seat of your pants, because there is no structure to it. It's really
No.
self-generated structure,
Yes.
and
And
that's not so easy.
no, and I don't like a lot of people, you talk to, and even people who are also writers, but who are also doing the day job. It's just like, oh, if only I had all the free time, if I did, this was all I was doing. And I am very lucky. I get to write professionally as my job. That is an
Right.
amazing, amazing gift. It's incredible. But there's other challenges. Because there was a long period where I was writing with, especially with Alex, in the very first few books where I was writing, but I also had a job. And once I even got published, I still had a job. That job schedule does actually help schedule out your writing too, because you only have certain windows in which you can do it. If you have the whole day, it's very hard to schedule things.
Right, right.
Um,
I had this equivalent when I had kids. It's like, wait a second, I only have from 10 to midnight.
exactly. And it's hard. And I do really admire people. Like, it's just unique challenges for all of it, right? And that's in the end. And so you have to be your own boss. You have to give yourself your own deadlines. Like, sometimes I've got friends, like I'll be panicking over, let's say, so my deadline for this coming of age middle grade that I finished, I was like, oh, I'm a week behind. I'll know I'll finish it next week, but I really wanted to get it done like yesterday, I'm really annoyed with myself. And like friends will be like, but it's your own deadline. And like, if I don't treat my own deadlines with rigor
Seriously,
as
yeah.
if they're like somebody else has
You
imposed them,
never
I will
finish.
never finish it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think the more disciplined, the better off you are. So,
Yeah.
well, that's hey, before we go, because I didn't, I just saw your sweatshirt that says "We're all mad here," so which
Yes.
reminded me to ask you a question. If you were a character from Alice in Wonderland, who would you be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, is it cheat? Okay, I feel like this is cheating, but I have like so much Alice in Wonderland. Like, obviously, I mean, so this is obviously why, you and I did the thing, right? Like, because I love Alice in Wonderland. Like, it's not a coincidence that this is an existing relationship. But in grade 10 in my art school, as a drama major, every year you had sort of a different focus. And in grade 10, a lot of that was on performance, like literally to others, like actually putting together a little production. And we were very fortunate in our year, we got to do Alice
Alice
in
in
Wonderland.
Wonderland.
And we had to audition for our drama teacher, and she sort of cast us. And I was cast as the White Queen, which is what I wanted.
Oh,
Um, and I I loved playing that character. I don't think I had ever played sort of a flighty character. Like there's something about me that people like to cast as like, here's a lawyer, like here's a very grounded human,
uh-huh.
even though irony, not at all. Um, but like I tend to get those sort of very like, let me,
Yeah,
an intelligent, grounded human.
yeah.
So I think she might have been the first sort of ditzy, flighty, I wouldn't call her a ditz, but flighty, changeable, weird, they're all weird character. And that meant a lot to me. I realized I like playing these sorts of characters, first of all. And second of all, I love the character and I like, all the wordplay, her particular scene that she has with Alice, with all the, you
Wordplay,
know,
yeah.
tomorrow, yesterday,
Yeah.
today, all that. And then of course, I had grown up, obviously I'd seen the Disney one, but there's this version of Alice in Wonderland from the 80s, and Carol Channing is the White Queen, and she has a song. And I'd grown up with that. That version I watched, it was two VHS tapes. The Jabberwocky, or Jabberwock, I should say,
Yeah.
was so scary that couldn't watch half of it. It gave me nightmares, but I still loved watching it. And I loved her so much. So getting to play the White Queen, and then you've got Anne Hathaway later and Tim
Yeah.
Burton, and then so I did that. I did a version of that costume for a Halloween once, like not quite as fantastic as hers, but I did like the blonde wig. I did anyway. So I guess my answer is the White Queen.
Well, that is a very, very good answer. And by the way, it might be the best answer of anybody that I've
Oh,
interviewed, because not only have you played the character, but in a play, you also dressed up as a Halloween costume. So
yeah.
it's generational from the 80s to present
All
day.
through my existence, I've always loved her. And of course, I did get to dress as your Alice,
You,
and
you,
that was
you did
kind of amazing too.
you did
So
play you
it was
did
from your world. That jacket, I'm sorry, I need to wear that jacket again.
You did play
So
the star, but there was a quality of the White Queen that you could have easily. I completely understand that. So, um, hey, is there a book or something that
oh,
if people wanted to start reading your work, where would you
where
suggest
would
they
I
start?
send people?
With the
I
the
mean,
Explorers or with Alex or
yeah, so here's the thing. I think just because the Alex is like, I'm approaching 20 years with that coming out, which blows my
Me
mind.
too. Me too.
It's it's just a very weird feeling. And the kids, there's one boy who wrote this, I don't know, he sent me an email for Alex, probably one of the first kids who emailed me about a book. And it was so great. And I put it up on my website. I had real reviews. Kid reviews are real too, but like official
Yeah.
reviews. And then I had kid reviews, and it Mike 13. And then on Twitter, this Michael person was talking about Alex and the Ironic Gentleman, and I sort of reached out. I'm like, oh, that's so great, because he's now an author. And I'm like, he's Mike 13. He was we had his whole chat, and now he's an author.
He's an
And I
author?
was like,
That's
oh,
amazing.
oh my God. Anyway, so but I do think Alex is still out there in places like it hasn't gone out of print actually, which is very exciting. I actually went to what's it called in LA? Is it the Last Bookstore? What's that
The last
amazing book?
bookstore. The last
Yeah.
bookstore. Yeah,
I
downtown.
went as a tourist a few years ago, pre-COVID. I was like, I wonder if they have anything of mine. Probably not, but I went, and the one thing they had was Alex. I was thrilled that Alex was the one that was there. So if you can find Alex and the Ironic Gentleman, that was like, quite an important seminal, my first
Yeah, you're
book.
first. Yeah.
But if you can't, yes, The Explorers, because that's out there. That's Random House. That's the red one is the first
Okay.
one.
And
There's also one called Hatter Madigan Goes in Heaven.
yes, well, don't worry. I won't forget about that one.
You can read that one
I
too.
have that one
Pretty
covered.
amazing.
Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure, and
So fun.
you're a great person to interview. You have such a diverse sort of creative life. I think it's really inspiring,
Well, thank you for having me. It's just so nice to see you again.
and it's
It's
really
so
good.
great.
It's good to see
It's
you
really
too.
nice. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
take care.
You too.
Bye.